Bonjour à tous. Donc, je vous propose de prendre refuge, de développer l'esprit d'éveil et
develop enlightened mind and recite the prayer to Nanju.
O Sangye Chetan Sogi Shonam Ra Jancho partout Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jiso Gi Pes Nam Gi Drola Penshi Sangye Lopa Sho Sangye Chetan Sogi Shonam Ra Jancho partout Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gipe Senang Dola Penchia Sangye Lopa Sho Sangye Chetan Sogi Shonam Ra Jancho partout Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gipe Senang Drola Penchia Sangye Lopa Sho Semshan Tamshe Dewa Tan Dewe Gyotan Dempa Gyochi Donel Tan Donel Gi Gyotan Drelwa Gyochi Donel Mepe Dewa Dampa Tan Milrelwa Gyochi Nyeri Shadan Tandrel Wetanyam Champora Nepa Gyochi Peldan Sawela Rinpoche Dagi Chiwa Bemedan Chura Kadrin Champe Gone Jesonte Koson Tukine Drosse Douce Chanden de Jampe Yala Chaselo Kangi Lodre Drini Trindre Nita Nantarase Jine Duncan Jishi Zichir Niki Tukalembansi Ganda Sipe Sera Mare Mento Donel Gizewe Trozo Kula Buchir Tase Yala Noche Yandenso Tropta Chedron Yemon Nilon Leki Chadron Drezech Marie Munsel Dunel Yogo Chine Chezeredre Dene Dakshi Sache Tarsan Yantan Lucho Gyase Toweku Chudra Chudan Chuni Gyatre Dale Munsel Jampe Yanlade Sedan Keki Kerab Ezergi Dale Timok Memparabselne Kadam tenche shulup topai L'odre poupée nawa setus. Donc,
We are studying a treatise called Entry to the State of a Pandita. This treatise was written by the first Mipham Rinpoche. This treatise is made up of 3 main parts. We're currently studying a section of the first main part. The first main part includes 10 themes. We are looking at the 4th theme, dependent arising. So let's look at the title and the meaning of the title. Tenshing Chelwa Chungwa. 10 meaning what supports, which is causes and conditions. When they are connected, Chelwa, Chelwa is the idea of connection. Then they allow for appearance or manifestation, Jungwa. Then we find the entirety of the title, Tenshing, Chelwa, Jungwa. These three characteristics are the characteristics of all samsaric manifestation. And then Khenpo Rinpoche gave supplementary explanations so that we would better understand dependent arising and what distinguishes it from other religious and philosophic groups. In this section, we went over 5 points. There are 2 types of dependent arising. An introduction to non-Buddhist schools of thought. We looked then at what a school of thought or established conclusion is. Then we looked at Buddhist schools of thought and their characteristics. There were 5 subparts to this section. The first subpart was, what is a Buddhist? We looked at the 4 characteristics that define an authentic Buddhist practitioner. And then we looked at the difference between the Buddhist view, meaning the 4 seals, and being a Buddhist. Then we looked at the Buddhist schools of thought. In the foundational school, we find the Vaibhashika and Sautrantika schools, and in the Great Vehicle, we find the Chittamatra and Madhyamaka schools. And then the 4th subpoint here, the differences between the 4 Buddhist schools of thought and the 4 lineages of Tibetan Buddhism. And in this point, we also saw that the 4 Tibetan Buddhist lineages all adhere to the Madhyamaka school of thought, which then brought us to the 2 divisions of Madhyamaka, the Rongtong and Shentong Madhyamaka. So quickly, Rongtong means empty of self. We explained this yesterday, as well as the Shentong point of view. So that concluded the 5th subpart of the 4th section, which brings us then to the 5th section, which was non-Buddhist schools of thought and their characteristics. Among these non-Buddhist schools of thought, yesterday we explained the Sravaka school. The Sravaka school is an annihilist school of thought which affirms that phenomena appear without cause. The Sravaka. We left off there yesterday. Khenpo Rinpoche will continue with the explanations from the root, for this phrase of the root text, which states, "They are not self-arisen, nor did they appear from time, an all-powerful creator, or some other cause, a permanent agent, which are not causes." They mean phenomena. They are not self-arisen, nor did they appear from time, an all-powerful creator, or some other cause, a permanent agent, which are not causes. So now we continue with another non-Buddhist school of thought, the schools that affirm that things appear based on a cause, but which is not a cause from a Buddhist point of view. This is why they are said not to be causes. This second type of viewpoint concerns the eternalist schools of thought. These eternalist schools of thought adopt a point of view which upholds the idea that things have a cause in terms of their origin. For the Sravaka, there was no cause. For the eternalists, there is a cause from their point of view, but which is not a cause from a Buddhist point of view. In ancient India and in India today, there are numerous schools of thought which lay out this point of view. Furthermore, Khenpo Rinpoche says, this is the viewpoint of the majority of religions in the world. They explain that a cause has created the world and the beings that inhabit it. This eternalist view, which presents a cause that is not a cause, includes two divisions. There are those who explain that a creator God created the world and its inhabitants, and that this creator God exists separately from its creation. There's a God that has created the world and its inhabitants, and which exists separately from its creations. Then there are those who affirm an inner creator agent. We'll see later on there is an inner cause known as Prakriti. There will be explanations on this. Concerning the second category of the eternalist point of view, this inner creator is the origin of the world and its inhabitants. Just to recap, the eternalist point of view adopts the perspective that the world and its inhabitants have a cause for their origin. For some, this cause is an inner cause. For others, it is an outer cause. Khenpo Rinpoche offered just a very brief explanation on the first type of point of view. In other words, that there is an outer creator agent that exists separately from its creations. Nevertheless, it's obvious that this concerns the point of view of theistic religions. Khenpo tells us that among the various Hindu traditions, there are many that affirm the existence of an outer creator God. According to Buddhism, this outer creator God that exists separately from its creations cannot have created the world and its inhabitants. Perhaps you recall what we discussed about what Nagarjuna laid out yesterday. If the cause and the effect are completely different, if they exist separately, then they are disconnected, separate, which means that a creator God could not have created the world and its inhabitants. For Buddhism, when the cause and effect are separate or disconnected, then the cause cannot have created the effect. For Buddhism, this is a mistaken point of view. A creator God cannot be the origin of the world and its inhabitants. This is the explanation of the eternalist point of view, which affirms that an outer creator God, separate from its creations, has created the world and its inhabitants. The second division of this eternalist point of view concerns schools of thought that accept a creator, which is something different than a God. In this category, we find two subdivisions. Among these two schools of thought, which were present in ancient India and are still present today, there is the Samkhya school of thought, also known as the listers, those who list or make lists. They affirm the existence of an inner creator agent and the second school of this type of eternalist perspective is the Jain school of thought, which also affirms the existence of a creator agent, which is the origin of the universe. It is not an outer agent, such as a God. Khenpo Rinpoche gave explanations concerning these two schools of thought. So now we'll offer the etymology of the Samkhya school. Samkhya is a Sanskrit word that literally means endowed with a number. We can also translate this as the listers, those who list, because this school of thought explains the world's functioning by listing phenomena. This school of thought explains the functioning of the world by listing phenomena. This is why they are called the listers. The word Samkhya also includes the meaning authentic discernment that knows the universe and all its perspectives. That concerns the etymology of the word Samkhya. Now we may ask ourselves how this Samkhya school of thought is defined. There are two aspects, an inner aspect and an outer aspect. The inner aspect is what is called Purusha in Sanskrit. What is Purusha? It is a higher self or a higher individual. It is knowledge. Purusha is an individual higher self. It is knowledge. Every individual has a Purusha. Concerning the outer aspect, this concerns Prakriti, which is also a Sanskrit word. Prakriti is matter, And it is the creator of outer phenomena. Purusha and Prakriti, the inner and outer aspects, exist since beginningless time, separately from one another. There is no connection between them. So they existed separately from one another, and then one day, Purusha, knowledge, gave rise to the concept, or the conceptual thought, I need an object, or I want to interact with objects. And this is ignorance appearing. Before this thought appeared, Purusha was authentic primordial knowledge. From the moment that this conceptual thought arose, this thought, I want an object, at this moment, authentic primordial wisdom is mixed with ignorance. As soon as ignorance mixes with this primordial wisdom, suffering appears. For example, when a child is born, a newborn, just after its birth, has no conceptual thoughts of desire. But after a year or two, desire attachment will increase continuously. And this is the beginning of suffering. This example illustrates how beings find themselves in confusion or mistaken understanding. What happens is that once the thought, I need an object, appears, this activates Prakriti, the source of material phenomena. Prakriti begins manifesting material phenomena, objects of desire, etc. These material phenomena imprison Purusha in suffering. This is how samsara occurs, according to the Samkhya school. From the moment that samsara is present, there is only suffering. In relation to suffering, this school of thought talks about 3 types of suffering, similar to in Buddhism, but these 3 types of suffering are not the same as those we find in Buddhist explanations. For this school of thought, the first type of suffering is connected to an imbalance in the 4 elements that make up matter. water, earth, fire, and wind. They say that when there is an imbalance in terms of these four fundamental substances in someone's body, then illness appears, and this produces suffering. Likewise, concerning the outer environment, when there is imbalance in terms of the components of matter, then there are natural disasters, floods, avalanches, etc., which likewise create suffering. The second type of suffering, according to this school of thought, is created by gods and humans who are superior to us and who do not like us. And these higher beings, whether they are gods or other humans who are superior to us, those who don't like us will create suffering for us. The third type of suffering is produced by demigods and non-human beings who are ill-intentioned, like demons, etc. These beings create suffering for us. According to the Samkhya school, samsara is completely filled with these three types of suffering, embedded with these three types of suffering. According to the Samkhya school, we are not doomed to remain in this suffering. There is a possibility of becoming liberated from samsara and its suffering. They say that when we focus on perfect knowledge, which is Purusha, at this moment, the inclinations that lead us to interact with outer things will disappear, and liberation from samsara can be obtained. And this is how they explain the possibility for becoming liberated from samsara. We focus on perfect knowledge, which is Purusha, and at this point, the inclination that leads us to interact with outer phenomena disappear, and we become liberated from samsara. A practitioner of this school of thought who wishes to attain liberation will train in different types of samadhi with the goal of rediscovering perfect knowledge. Samadhi is a Sanskrit word which means meditative concentration. Thus, to become liberated, a practitioner will train in different types of samadhi with the goal of rediscovering perfect knowledge. They will do this by looking inward. When they manage to do this, all outer objects that Purusha interacted with previously are reabsorbed by Prakriti, which manifested them in the beginning. Thus, by turning inward and training in different types of samadhi that allow them to rediscover perfect knowledge, when they are able to do this, all of the outer objects that Purusha interacted with previously are reabsorbed into Prakriti. Once Purusha has cut off contact with Prakriti and its manifestations, liberation is attained and suffering ceases. It's okay, not too fast. Yeah. Each being possesses an individual Purusha and becomes liberated from confusion and cuts off contact with outer objects. This occurs individually. Once this has been accomplished, Purusha unifies or comes together with the Supreme Purusha or Supreme Self. The path and liberation are individual, but the fruit or result is cosmic or universal. Each being has an individual Purusha, their path and their liberation will be individual, but when the fruit is attained, this individual Purusha will unify with a universal or cosmic Purusha. So now we'll go into some details about the philosophy of this school. With further explanations about what Purusha and Prakriti are. We will explain the characteristics of Purusha and Prakriti. There are 5 characteristics of Purusha. It is a singular, unique entity. It is eternal, second characteristic. It does not create anything. It is not a creator. Purusha enjoys. It uses or interacts with things. It enjoys, profits from, we could say, it uses and interacts with things. And the last characteristic of Purusha is that it is a supreme self. It has its own reality. It does not depend on anything else to exist. It is independent. It is a unique, eternal entity which is not a creator. It interacts with things, and it is a supreme self, These are the 5 characteristics of Purusha. Now we'll look at the characteristics of Prakriti. According to this school, Prakriti is the element that is continually tricking us. This Prakriti produces outer phenomena, as was said, and creates illusion for the confused Purusha, which interacts with phenomena. So now we come to further explanations. Prakriti has 9 characteristics. Prakriti is matter. It is devoid of mind. And the second characteristic is that Prakriti possesses 3 properties, which are called Raja, Tamas, and Sattva. So the second characteristic is when these 3 properties are equally balanced, when the proportions are even. This second characteristic is when these 3 qualities remain balanced. And this is true so long as Prakriti is inactive. Raja is the aspect of absence of clarity. It is matter, thus it is not animated by mind. Tamas refers to the activity of creation. What does Prakriti create? It creates visible phenomena, sound phenomena, smells, tastes, and tactile phenomena. It is a creator agent. Prakriti produces all phenomena of the 5 elements and the 5 sense objects. And then the third property is Sattva, which is the capacity to make phenomena manifest or evident. Sattva produces all phenomena that know. The 5 sense faculties, the mental faculty, and the 5 action faculties. The action faculties will be explained later on. The sense faculties and mental faculty you are familiar with from previous explanations. When Prakriti doesn't answer or reply to ignorant thoughts that have contaminated Purusha, Prakriti is in an inactive phase. And these 3 properties, Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva, are simply present as a potential. They don't do anything, and they simply abide in a balanced state. Only as a response to ignorance, which activates it, is their production of outer objects. And these three characteristics, these three qualities, are present as a potential. When ignorance appears, then Prakriti produces outer objects. So that was the second characteristic, including these three properties. The third characteristic is that it is the creator of all phenomena. It is the creator of all phenomena that Purusha will interact with when it is contaminated by ignorance. The fourth characteristic is that Prakriti does not interact with its own creations. It does not enjoy its creations. It is simply the source of all objects of knowledge. As it was said, Purusha is what interacts with the creations. The fifth characteristic is that Prakriti is solely the cause of creations, but never the fruit. It is the cause of creations, but it is never the fruit or result. Prakriti exists independently of anything or everything else. The sixth characteristic, Prakriti is a phenomenon that is not obvious, it is not clear, it is inanimate. It does not contain any clear knowledge. It's simply matter. The seventh characteristic is that it is eternal. It does not change. The eighth characteristic is that Prakriti is present in all objects. It influences each of its creations because it remains in or abides in each of them. Khenpo explains that there is just one Prakriti which is present in all objects. The ninth characteristic of Prakriti is that it is a single entity. It is not made up of a multitude of things. That concludes the 9 characteristics of Prakriti. It was said that so long as Prakriti does not answer or respond to Purusha contaminated by ignorance, Purusha does not do anything. And the 3 properties, Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva, are balanced and they remain simply present. Then comes the moment when Prakriti responds to Purusha contaminated by ignorance. In this case, the 3 properties are no longer simply present as a potential. they become imbalanced and begin to produce objects of knowledge. At this moment, confused Purusha interacts with these outer phenomena. Prakriti has no thoughts. It is material. Simply, when Purusha is in mistaken understanding, Prakriti emanates various things. Based on the property sattva, then the 6 faculties will appear. Eye faculty, ear faculty, nose, tongue, body faculty, and mental faculty. From the Samkhya point of view. Khenpo gives an example. Based on pride, endowed with this property, sattva, which produces all phenomena, then the 11 faculties appear. For the moment, you may be asking what these 11 are, because we've talked about 6. We'll talk about the other 5 later on. Here, Khenpo offers clarification. What it is important to understand is that these faculties are not properties of Purusha. These faculties are attributes of what is emanated. In other words, Prakriti. These faculties manifest to Purusha, and Purusha is tricked by them. The faculties themselves are material. Here, Khenpo makes a little comparison with Buddhism. In this tradition, mental faculty is a material phenomenon, which is very different from a mental faculty in Buddhism. And then Khenpo's translator, Kiki, added something which I'll share with you. It's important to keep in mind that this is an ancient school of thought. We shouldn't try to connect these teachings to Buddhist teachings. Otherwise, you will be confused, like I was, she said. It's necessary to simply take the information for what it is without trying to make sense of it from a Buddhist teaching, because it's not a Buddhist point of view. She continued by saying that if you try to make sense of it, you'll find a lot of contradictions in what's said. So just relax. So now we'll come back to Khenpo's teaching. Continuing with Purusha and Prakriti, it was said that prior to contamination with ignorance, Purusha is simply higher knowledge. Perfect higher knowledge, without complications or suffering. Then ignorance appears. It activates Prakriti, which produces objects, which Purusha, contaminated by ignorance, will interact with. That's a helpful summary. Prakriti has produced 5 sense faculties and mental faculty. Each object of knowledge begins to manifest in various ways due to the 6 faculties that they are endowed with. Objects become visible, audible, etc., based on their faculties. And this produces more and more ignorance for contaminated Purusha. Purusha becomes more and more confused and ever more a prisoner of samsara. Here, Khenpo explains that there are not only 6 faculties, there are 11 in addition to the 6 faculties that have been named: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mental faculty. We also find 5 additional faculties in this school, which are named the action faculties, which allow for physical actions, such as 2 hands. The faculty called hands allows Purusha to pick up food and eat it, for example. As we said in the list of qualities, one of Purusha's qualities is that it enjoys phenomena. So hands allow for eating. The faculty feet allow Purusha to move around, to go or come from places. Go to, come from. In terms of digestive processes, it acquires the faculty of expulsing bodily waste. It is also endowed with genitalia. There are thus men and women and the various implications of this. Purusha can do this because at this point it is no longer concerned with perfect higher knowledge. It is a prisoner of the world. It walks, exercises, eats, uses the toilet. All of these action faculties trick Purusha. All of these action faculties trick Purusha. It believes that it sees, that it eats, that it walks, but this is not the case. This is how the Samkhya school explains samsara's functioning, the functioning of an impure universe. Purusha possesses all of these things due to the fact that it is a human being or an animal. All beings have feet or hands, mouth to eat with, various orifices of the body through which they can expel bodily waste. There are muscles that allow for movement of the body. And there is genitalia to allow for reproduction. Khenpo concludes by saying that the key point in all of this is that in order to attain liberation, confused Purusha that is contaminated by ignorance, needs to cut off contact with what has been created by Prakriti. This is how one achieves liberation. And in order to do this, various types of samadhi and various yoga exercises were taught, as well as various methods based on prana functioning. Khenpo did not explain what prana is in this context. Today, the masters in this tradition begin by teaching yoga exercises to their students. Once these adepts are in good health and have a calmer mind due to this, masters guide them further and transmit teachings concerning the point of view that we just discussed. And now Olivier will conclude this school of thought. Why don't we start with a short silent break? The Samkhya school is a school of thought that affirms that phenomena appear from causes that are not causes. Why? Because according to Buddhism, these things that are cited are not in any way causes. According to Buddhism, this Samkhya school of thought and the way that it explains reality is mistaken. We find many contradictions in this presentation. For example, there's talk about eternal qualities and yet also accomplishing actions. Action necessarily involves impermanence, those various actions that are carried out. And yet, the Samkhya are nevertheless talking about eternal qualities. So this is in contradiction with impermanence. All of these characteristics explained by the Samkhya school are in contradiction with each other. You may be wondering why we studied the Samkhya school in detail. Khenpo gave some answers to this. He said, perhaps you're finding all of this somewhat confusing. You've probably never heard of this presentation beforehand. Perhaps you think that it's not necessary to go into all this detail. Nevertheless, Khenpo judged that it's necessary to mention this presentation because today there are many books that present this point of view, the Samkhya point of view, and people buy these books and read them. Thus, it's helpful to have an idea about these points of view, the Samkhya point of view and other similar perspectives, so that you can understand that what you're reading is not a Buddhist teaching. Indeed, there are various aspects of these explanations that resemble Buddhism in certain ways. So you may think that there's no difference between these traditions and Buddhism, but indeed there is a difference. There are many people today who teach Buddhism and who have read books that cover this presentation of reality, in which there are certain similarities with Buddhism. Many of these Buddhist teachers say that there is no difference between these traditions, and this is a mistake. The explanations that you heard concerning Purusha may seem similar to those of Buddha nature. Therefore, people may be under the impression or hold that there's no difference between Buddha nature and this Purusha. But we can see, when we go into detail, concerning the presentation of Purusha and the details of Buddha nature, we'll see that there are many differences. There are also Buddhist teachers, when they teach Buddhism, they bring in perspectives from Purusha without realizing that they're doing so, based on reading this type of information. And they may share false views without realizing it. For example, in Buddhist writings, the attribute eternal is used to describe Buddha nature. But when we use the term eternal to describe Buddha nature, the meaning is not the same as eternal in terms of time as it is for Purusha. Eternal, in the context of Buddha nature, means something that is beyond the realm of intellect, and the way that intellect defines this attribute, eternal. Once again, eternal, in the context of Buddha nature, means that it is beyond the realm of intellect, and the way that intellect defines this attribute, eternal. It doesn't mean eternal in terms of time, as it does regarding Purusha. The word is the same, but it means different things in the context of the teachings on Buddha nature and in the context of the Samkhya school. Even if all of this is a bit confusing or not very clear, it is nevertheless good to hear some explanations concerning these non-Buddhist schools, so as not to find ourselves listening to a teacher who is, without knowing it, laying out a non-Buddhist view. We may think that it's a Buddhist perspective, when in fact what we're hearing is an explanation not connected with Buddhism. Knowing about these schools of thought will allow us to recognize that what's being explained is not a Buddhist point of view. That concerns the Samkhya school. We can begin the explanations of the Jain school, or if it's too much. Okay, first we can spell Samkhya, Samkhya. So we'll begin looking at the Jain school of thought. The Jain school of thought, as Barbara mentioned, is another non-Buddhist tradition that accepts a creator which is not a god. This tradition is the Jain tradition, which in its Tibetan translation means those who are nude. It is still present today in India. The Jain consider humans, animals, and also trees and plants as being endowed with life force. For them, this life force is different sizes depending on different supports. In this school of thought, khenpo in Tibetan is mentioned. This term, khenpo, refers to an individual who is born in the world and who possesses a certain capacity. Khenpo means endowed with life force. They refer to the same thing. This refers to beings. There are many synonyms that were given for beings. Endowed with life force. Khenpo endowed with capacity, or endowed with a mind. Semchen, which can also be translated by sentient being, but literally the term means endowed with a mind. With mind. Specifically, when we talk about endowed with life force, this refers to what breathes and which has the capacity to focus on an object, to know it, and to experience it. When we talk about endowed with life force, this means what is endowed with breath and what has the ability to focus on an object, to know it, and to experience it. The Jain consider that samsara exists and that as we go through samsara, suffering is experienced. They hold that actions are the root of all suffering that is experienced. They believe that the creator of all this suffering is actions, karma. This point of view is fairly close to the Buddhist point of view, but in Buddhism what's said is that happy and unhappy appearances appear based on actions, but actions are not considered to be a truly existing creator. So what's said, which seems similar to the Jain tradition in Buddhism, is that happy and unhappy appearances appear based on actions. But actions in Buddhism are not considered to be a truly existing creator, whereas in the Jain school, actions are considered to be truly existing. Thus, when we practice austerity, it's possible to eradicate the karmic force of past actions. According to the Jain, if actions had no reality, it wouldn't be possible to eradicate them. There would be nothing to eliminate if they didn't truly exist. For the according to the Jain, the Buddhist view that actions are not truly existing is incorrect. Because if they don't truly exist, we can't eliminate them. It is necessary for actions to truly exist in order to be able to eliminate the karmic force that results from them. Okay. save things here. If you have questions, we have 10 minutes. I'd like to come back to the Samkhya. I saw that that Kiki did some comparison. But if khenpo decided to share this, it's necessary to compare the Samkhya school and Buddhism. It must be useful. So I have two questions. When khenpo talks about books that are colored by this type of thought, or that express this type of thought, what kind of books is he talking about? Is he talking about books concerning Indian books that appear in India and Tibet, and does that concern us? Likewise, concerning the Samkhya perspective, do they explain how this supreme, authentic, eternal Purusha one day produces this conceptual thought? I can just answer the first question. I found books that talk about the Supreme Self. I don't have the titles handy, but I've come across them. I read them before encountering Buddhism. It's pretty common. The idea of an inner self that unifies with an outer self, cosmic self. Yeah, I definitely have come across this. In France, there's lots. Here. In any case, I've seen enough. I've said a lot, but in any case, yeah, we come across them. Indeed, that's the type of philosophy that underlies all of most of the yoga practices that are carried out today in France. Practicing yoga in an intensive way generally leads to philosophy, and often it's Samkhya philosophy that's taught. And so, yeah, it's pretty prevalent today. And the second question. How does Purusha have a conceptual thought? I think a boy gets bored, apparently. No, that's a joke. He didn't explain it. Khenpo didn't explain. Simply, at a certain point, this conceptual thought appears. I want an object. That's all he said. I'd like to come back to actions. The Jain's perspective. If there is an action, it has a karmic charge. And wouldn't it then have the same effect? Wouldn't the same action have the same effect on everyone? Whereas we can see that for a same phenomenon, we all experience them differently. Is action relative to the individual, or is it something that truly exists with its own nature? I'm not sure if my question's clear. Maybe I can just explain it again quickly. Maybe it'll be clearer. In the Jain school, what's said is that the creator, agent, is an inner creator, which is actions. actions will create all suffering that is experienced by an individual. So it's something internal to the individual? Yes, it's internal to the individual. It's somewhat similar to Buddhism, where we say that happy and unhappy appearances, suffering, unpleasant appearances that are experienced are produced based on action. But for the Jain, this creator actions are truly existing, whereas in Buddhism, they're not considered to be truly existing. For the Jain, the actions that we commit, that we carry out, are truly existing and produce all the appearances of suffering, all of the suffering that we experience. One of the arguments, as it was said, is that it must be real because we can eradicate these actions based on practicing austerity, and thus to become liberated from samsara. If these actions weren't real, there would be no point in practicing austerity because there would be nothing to eliminate. Therefore, it exists. Due to the fact that actions truly exist, we can eradicate or eliminate them. Concerning the characteristics of Purusha, I wrote down for the fourth one, it enjoys, it interacts with things. That's only contaminated Purusha, right? Because when there's no Prakriti, then manifestation ceases. Yes, indeed, that concerns contaminated Purusha, because uncontaminated Purusha, as we said, is higher knowledge. I was wondering, you say that there are many people or books concerning the Samkhya school, and therefore there are many people who follow this philosophy. Are there people who have attained enlightenment? Are there people who have become quite evolved by following this philosophy? Well, there are many beings in India who, notably in India, who practice these samadhis and who have attained levels of realization in that tradition, who can have extrasensory perception, etc., and may be reborn in the form realm or the formless realm, as it's defined in Buddhism, in experiences of great peace and great felicity. But according to Buddhism, that remains a part of samsara. It's still within the cycle of existences. It's not really liberation. In that tradition, they speak about liberation, but according to Buddhism, that result isn't truly liberation. But yes, they realize the fruit that corresponds to their tradition. Concerning this idea of eternal in Buddhism, what came up, what I thought, is related to the succession of moments. If there is a succession of moments, necessarily it's not eternal. So then the question that came up is, does this correspond? Is this what it means when we talk about what? Synchronicity of causes and conditions. Concerning eternal in the context of Buddhism, the way that it was explained is that it has nothing to do with eternal in terms of time. In other teachings, it's what is explained in Buddhism is that it is what is beyond time. But what do you mean by synchronicity? It's representations that we make. Is this representation correct to say that yes, things occur because there are causes and conditions, and at a moment something will appear, there will be a manifestation. And that's in the context of what is conditioned, what's impermanent. And then beyond that, there's no further notion of time. It made me think about this word, which isn't very clear. Eternal is not related to something that is conditioned. Conditioned things are impermanent, but it's also not eternal in terms of things that are unchanging, that it always stays the same. Buddha nature is not eternal in this sense. We can't conceive it. It is beyond the notions of permanence and impermanence. That's our time. We'll conclude here for today.
Demain, c'est à 14h30 au lieu de 15h.
Begin at 2:30 rather than 3 o'clock, as it's the last day.